And I'd like to start off, Gunnar, with I think you very vividly described the need to have a high-speed broadband, because it's not just a question of having broadband. It needs to have a full capacity to be able, as you very nice give examples, to have these services that will drive growth. And my question to you is really, with your colleagues in the European Parliament, within the group and so forth, do you think that there's developing an understanding of the need not just only for broadband, but for high-capacity broadband? It's not just a question about rolling out broadband in Europe, but as you said, I mean, it's good that we have the targets, but maybe they're starting to get a little bit outdated. So my question is basically, is there a discussion about this in the group and in the Parliament? And is there an understanding of the regulatory difficulties of achieving the 1 gigabit vision?
I think there is an understanding. I got the support for these targets when we discussed the Connecting Europe facilities, but we lost it in the negotiations with the Council. But on the other hand, I don't think any one of us understands it, because as Jürgen said, it's a lot. And 30 megabits is also a lot. I mean, if we had 30 megabits, no one else would complain, and if we have 100 megabits, it's very good as well. It's difficult to interpret. But another way of doing it is to explain the fact that the services of today wouldn't have been possible with the capacities of yesterday. And the services of tomorrow will not be possible with the capacities of today. Then you get a reach on it. But that's the way it is. And if you then even would like to have the services of the next day after tomorrow, and understand that this is an exponential development more and more. Let me just give you one very short reflection. During the European election campaign, we are an extremely modern office, and we had annual meetings. I was in the campaign bus in Sweden, and some was here and some was in the bus, and we had conference over FaceTime. I felt like James Bond. But this was in some way, you can compare this to black and white TV, because in some years this will be seen as black and white TV. Think of the fact that a family, not only over Christmas Eve, all of them from 5 or 6 different points are meeting and celebrating Christmas together from different parts of the world. Do you think that is unlikely? It will be, and it will be in a number of other circumstances. And this will require lots of broadband. And where you can do that, and my point is, then one can say, do we need that, and that is only for pleasure, etc. It is not only for pleasure, because it will be the rule for a lot of other parts of society as well. If we want to be able to do that, we need to increase the ambitions, because otherwise we are doing the mistake and trying to reach where we already are.
And just if anyone from the floor would like to ask a question, the floor is open. Yes, please.
Andrew Sterling, welcome to your description of where we need to be. Thank you. Thank you. And like your 1 gigabit target, which I think is much more relevant, the only question would be, what percentage of homes could that realistically be delivered? Is there a danger in setting a percentage that forces you to have an unambitious target, or can you see a way around that?
Yes, that's a very valid and important point. I think when I thought more about it, I came to the conclusion that the 1 gigabit might be dangerous as well, because that may be too low. So maybe we shouldn't be too focused on the different percents and levels and shares, etc., but to understand the high speed of the development in this area. So the answer is no. I don't think it's dangerous from that perspective, but from the other perspective, that it could be dangerous, that it will think it's good enough, and then suddenly 2018 things have changed very rapidly, so it is not enough even then. So I think let's have respect for all the things we can do and achieve via the broadband. And let's have respect for the facts that we will be surprised every year what we can do. That would be my philosophical answer.
Thanks. And do you think we should also have transparency on things like upload speeds and contention ratios, which affect the end user experience of broadband?
Yes, I think that's of course quite good. I think it is sometimes more complicated than we as consumers presume, because it is difficult to define all sorts of situations. But the interesting thing is that I'm living in the center of Stockholm, and I have higher speeds in my country house, which is quite rural, because the mobile connection is more faster than my fixed connection. This shows that a lot of things, is it possible? Well, my answer is that with the different generations and the technological trimming we can do of each generations, most things will be possible. And I don't think that the rural areas will be put behind if we are thinking ambitious enough. The risk is that the rural areas will be set behind if we are too much believing in these targets and connecting them to public investments, because then the public investments will be a restriction for the rural areas rather than a base for the development.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I need to rush to the
Just
airport.
one quick question about that public investment. There is still, I think, with the target set, it's the need for having to achieve these targets. It's really important to do what is necessary. And as we all know that you're not a staunch supporter of state subsidies, you still said, and, you know, as you said, you were a little bit disappointed about the EU budgetary constraints, that there's a need for PPP, public-private partnership solutions, to achieve these investments, especially maybe in rural areas. Right.
Where otherwise we'll not have commercial investments.
Yeah.
And I could also think of, maybe you can also have it when you can achieve speeds which today are not commercial. But let's say if the cities of, speaking in the Swedish environment, cities of Uppsala and Lund would like to have 5 gigabits. You can't argue for that from commercial points of view today. But it would be a quite fascinating thing that if these research centers would have the leading broadband facilities in the world.
Okay, thank you very much, Gunnar, and I know you have to run, so thank you, and we'll keep moving the debate for higher broadband speeds forward. Thank you.
That's a very good idea. Thank
and
you.
have a good stay in Latvia. Was it Estonia? Thank you, Gunnar. Thank you. So now, if we sort of move back to you, Mr. Dupuy, it's a little bit back and forth. I'm sorry about this, but I would like to, before you have to leave, have the opportunity to have a little discussion about some of the things you raised in your speech. What we are seeing is that you were raising the question about the deployment side and the cooperation of certain, basically different utilities need to cooperate to roll out broadband. And in that sense, we are seeing more collaboration between the private and the public sector. And in conjunction with the discussion about the budgetary restraints on the EU side, sorry. All right. What is the Commission's idea about PPP solutions regarding to this? Because we are the collaboration here is going to be essential, especially if we would like to move forward to achieving these kinds of broadband speeds. And is the Commission looking at this kind of cooperation in a different way? Would you say there has been a development in that discussion?
There are lots of things that happen thankfully without our intervention.
Yes.
And when there's a will, there's a way. For instance, if you just take the high voltage lines that are being rolled out nowadays, they all have a nucleus which is fiber. It just does not happen otherwise nowadays. If you look at the motorways that are being built, I mean, those ducts are being built. Why is that? Because it is also the interest of those utility companies to have their own capacity, because the intelligent transport system of tomorrow, we mentioned the connected car, will be based on communication between cars, communication between the infrastructure, the transport infrastructure, and the cars. But obviously those capacities are overwhelming for the needs that are those of those companies today. So there is no reason why that capacity should not be leased. And it is already happening. So we don't need necessarily a public-private partnership, being forced by a public authority trying to put those people together. It does happen already to a large extent. What we have tried to do with the directive is to make sure that when it did not happen, when there was in a way lack of awareness of those extra capacity, or more often than not when there was simply lack of coordination, lack of information, lack of timely information being given to the telecom operators when the ducts are being open, that information reaches them in a time which is useful for them to roll out. So this is the extra mile that is needed, which is costly, and that will help, hopefully, but we don't need necessarily in every single case a PPP to be established for this to happen.
No, I think it was, I didn't mean driven by the Commission, but accepted,
Sure.
so to speak. Do we have any questions for Monsieur Dupuy from the floor? Yes, please, down there. Yes, please. It's from Amlex, I think,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
We all know what happened with the Connecting Europe facility.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an idea of how to avoid a similar meltdown, as it were, in these new funds, the 300 billion that should go to telecoms? I mean, what went wrong, and what can we learn, and what can you do to?
In a way, it's always easier to kill the newcomer, and CEF was in a way the newcomer in the bigger game, which was that of the financial framework discussions. It was a leap in the unknown to some extent, including for the telecom operators themselves. So we know that there was paradoxically among some of the operators feelings that was not necessarily the best way forward. I think this kind of reasoning has actually changed. And this is why the demonstrations, I mentioned the project bonds, and we have lots of signs nowadays that show that the context and the thinking also of all the stakeholders has evolved since the situation just a few years behind us. This is not about saying that if we were to make the same proposal tomorrow, it would succeed. Let's be realistic. Those things have to be thought through and well prepared. And we will obviously draw the lessons from the past experience. I'm not saying, however, that as part of the 300 billion package, the CEF will be a prominent part of it, because at this very moment, those decisions have not been taken. And so I would not necessarily, therefore, consider this as the main option in view of the to-be-announced package. However, that does not prevent us to start, in a way, consulting and taking the temperature in a way of the sector, and not just of the sectors. I mean, again, the utility companies, some of them are even moving into the sector as operators, to have also the manufacturers. I mean, there are lots of stakeholders, and obviously from the bottom-up approach, the local authorities. there are lots of stakeholders in this game, and in a way it's the convergence between all these interests, I think, that will take shape in the 300 billion package. But the CEF is definitely one potential key element in it, but at this moment in time it's too early to say.
I would like to follow up on the question, because in essence we are looking to have new investments in infrastructure, basically. And do you think in the discussions that are now taking place after the budget discussion, and I think the view is that there is a common position within the Commission that this rollout needs to happen, the deployment, the directive for the utilities is one thing, but also there's a discussion about stimulating investment in fibre networks, and then obviously we come to the question of price regulation and so forth, and the balance between stimulating investment and the competition rules, and in a reformed ex-ante system. Because there are a lot of people that think maybe that we need to find a different balance, because as my previous question about PPP is really about the question, what can we do together without really invoking state aid rules?
I'm afraid I will be quite frustrating in my response. Again, all these questions are obviously subject to discussions internally at this very moment, but the political decisions are still to be made, and so it is important that the review of the telecom single market, as has been announced, does explore every avenues. I mean, in a way, one of them has already been said with, do we need gigabit? Gigabit means you drop the principle of technology neutrality. Is this acceptable? How much of that goes against even technological innovation? Who could say just 10 years ago that satellite would potentially reach 30 megabit by 2020? And what about GFAST? What about TWDM? I mean, there are lots of technological progress that was just lab experiments a few years ago, which are not now reaching the markets. So what seemed to be out of reach from a technological viewpoint not so long ago is now a potential. So in a way that comes back also to the innovation discussion we had earlier. The innovation is also happening in the technological progress. This will have an impact, obviously, on the legislation, on the need to adapt our own tools to this new reality. But it is obviously too soon, I would say today, to have clear-cut signs of where that direction the Commission will take. And so I would say be a little bit more patient. There will be obviously announcements in the coming month about this, but it is still to be made.
But I think even though you are giving a very, well, let me express it in a Commission-wise response, I would still say that I think it's an interesting response, because in essence the important thing I think for many in the sector is that knowing that there is this discussion going on. So for the outside community being able to participate in that, and we all have different views on this, but knowing that there is a common well, more or less common anyway, sense that there needs to be maybe a new balance struck. Where that balance is going to be, obviously, is an open question, but there's an awareness of that, because we are moving more and more towards new technologies. And I think one of the things that are interested in this, I don't know if you want to comment on it, but on the revision of the different markets, it's really a question about we can see now it's not one net, not one technology, one service. It is many different kinds of net needs to service both companies, consumers, etc. And obviously that has called for a need to reframe the market regulation, and that the telecom market the different markets cannot be seen as isolated markets. And when now I'm more or less interpreting you. So my question is going to be, am I in the right track? Give me a yes or no. Or would you like to go on that?
Short answer.
I will generate even more frustration than the Commission has an open mind about those things, and it has to be so simply because the sector is a very dynamic one. Convergence does happen. Some people say it should happen. It should have happened already earlier, and some already predicted for tomorrow. But it is a very dynamic sector. There's no doubt about that. So the legislation has to be agile, just as the the new innovation is producing effects. However, let's say from another angle, stability is sometimes about not fixing things which aren't necessarily very broken. So I would not again at this stage tell you whether the balance will be, or rather on one incremental change and on which kind of instruments at our disposal, and on the other hand more radical changes. If you're aware of some policy statements that Commissioner Oettinger also made a few recently, I mean, all these ideas need to be floated freely. The Commissioner Oettinger mentioned the fact that there shouldn't be any taboos about those things, which is, I think, a very healthy approach. But the time for reflection, for consultation will come, and it will be structured, and then the decision will be made. It will be fast. There is clearly a very strong will on the part of this new college to move things quickly, and this is why those announcements on the package, on the TSM, are the top priorities. In between now and the next 6 months, those announcements will be made. But it is still too soon for me to give you any hope as to which interpretation should prevail.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the floor before Mr. Dupuy needs to leave? Because otherwise, if you don't take the opportunity now? Okay. Everybody seems to be very, very happy with that answer.
Or frustrated.
We're not giving up. But can no. In essence, I would say that also trying to interpret in the sense that I think for us working with these questions every day, and I think you're indicating that in your answer as well, is that it is not really a regulatory problem most of the times. It might be an application problem. Sure. And I think for you, I realize that sometimes you are getting questions that is not really something that is put on by the regulation itself. It's more about how it's being applied. But then the question is really the cooperation now with the national regulatory authorities and BEREC. Would you see? Can I ask you? Could you see changes in the working procedure between the Commission and BEREC and the national authorities? Because we've seen a lot of communications from the Commission in the last years, I wouldn't name any names, but sometimes we feel that they're not being picked up by the national authorities. Would you see a different process or a closer? Do you see that discussion getting closer and closer between you and the national authorities?
I'm really sorry. Again, it's going to be a frustrating answer. I can only say that it is the governance issues, since this is your questions, is also a part of the reflection. But again, the relationship between the Commission, BEREC as an entity, and the various individual national regulatory authorities has been built over the years. And I cannot tell you whether this will be an issue as such, if issue there is. There will be again, we look at the various proposals. Interestingly enough, Goran Marby recently also mentioned, for instance, the Broadband Forum in Sweden as a potential model for new ways of interacting. So the governance might not be just between, I would say, regulatory powers, but it may also take other shapes. So all these options are worth floating, discussing, and they will eventually come to, let's say, a more structured dialogue in the coming month. Again, I'm sorry to be so woolly in a way at this stage, but the timing of the seminar like today is unfortunately of that nature. Until the new college has taken decisions and really got to the bottom of those issues itself, it is very difficult for us to really give you hints as to where those things will go. And honestly, because I don't know myself, it may really turn into a direction that I cannot foresee today.
I think the timing is right, because we don't want to have seminars when you made up your mind. And I think that is really the question. I think one of the reasons why we're here today is that we are feeling that there is a change happening. We don't know exactly where it's going yet, but I think many in this room and many feels that we as Gunnar put it, we feel the need of really deploying high-speed infrastructure fast around Europe, and then the topic is how can we do it and leave no stone unturned, really. And I think if that is the values that we're going into this revision of the framework, that is going to build a very good discussion and hopefully a new balanced change, if change is needed in the regulatory framework. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here today, Monsieur Dupuy. Thank you.